Well, if you've been watching cable news, the story that people are talking about, at least the story on the news, is black male voters. And what are black men going to do in this election cycle? Donald Trump told them, come on over to my side, come on over to the Republicans. He said Democrats have been taking black and Latino voters for granted. He said they opened the borders and they let in immigrants, and those immigrants are taking black jobs and Latino jobs. And he says, I have the solution. And that solution, according to him, is voting for Republicans at the top of the ticket, i.e. him. Well, is that an appeal that is resonating with black voters? Now, Kamala Harris says, rather than trying to scare black voters about some immigrants taking whatever a black job is, she says, I have an agenda for black men. And she laid it out on Monday. She calls it the Opportunity Agenda for Black Men. It's a 9-page document, and it details how she will provide tools for black men to build wealth, support their families, and lead their communities. Now, 9-page document is kind of short, but you may not know all that's in this 9 pages. Well, let me give you some of the highlights. Providing 1 million loans that are fully forgivable to black entrepreneurs and others to start a business. Those loans would be up to $20,000. In this plan is a plan to champion education, training, and mentorship programs that help black men get good paying jobs in high demand industries and lead their communities, including pathways to becoming teachers. Now, only 1% of all public school teachers are black men. Where are our black men in education? Well, Kamala Harris says this plan is going to create more opportunities for black men to become teachers. The plan also includes supporting a framework for cryptocurrency and other digital assets, so black men who invest and own these assets are protected. Also launching a national health equity initiative focused on the diseases that plague black men, like sickle cell, diabetes, mental health, prostate cancer, and other health challenges. Here's a big one: legalizing recreational marijuana and creating opportunities for black men, black Americans included, to succeed in the new marijuana industry. Well, lots of folks have been on talking about this plan, if it is what black men have been waiting for and what they've been waiting to hear from VP Harris. So I thought I'd ask some of my regular black male contributors, Dr. Rob Baker, former professor of African American Studies at the University of Wisconsin, who's also a community activist in Milwaukee. Been a lot of focus on Milwaukee and how black voters have defected from the Democratic Party, not gone over to the Republicans, but who have just decided that they didn't get the hope and change, or they didn't get the change that they hoped for in 2008. So many of them have not been voting. So I'm really glad to see Dr. Baker. I'm going to be in Milwaukee myself on Monday, stop number 3 in my Battleground State tour. I can't wait to talk to voters in Milwaukee about how they are feeling about this election. And also in this hour, Dr. André Brock is here. He is a communications professor, or he's a professor of Department of Literature, Media, and Communication at Georgia Institute of Technology. So I want to get Dr. Baker and Dr. Brock's take on this new opportunity economic plan for black men by Kamala Harris, and this notion that somehow black men would do better off, or would be better off, if they voted for Donald Trump. And okay, Dr. Brock, let me start with you. What do you think of this new plan?
I see it as a response to the lower black male voter turnout in the 2020 election, although that was redressed in the 2022. And so given that particular 6-point percentage swing, and you can find this information on the Pew Internet Life website, I think this is a micro-targeting approach to try to get an audience who can be swayed back into the voting booth.
But you said fine, like, take it or leave it. It didn't sound like an enthusiastic, like, this is great.
I mean, is there really a lot to be enthusiastic about with American politics these days?
Well, at least there's a plan, Dr. Baker. Donald Trump just said at a rally that the Democrats are taking black and brown voters, particularly men, for granted, and they should vote for him. I've not seen him roll out any plan for black or Latino voters. What we have heard is about mass deportation plans. We've heard about, the restricting of women's rights to choose. So what do you make of this plan?
I think it's a great start. And I think she's digging deeply into the cultural values of Black men, particularly around cryptocurrency. Today in my class, I had a young Black man who was talking about cryptocurrency. He was completely into it. And over the last several years, I know a lot of young Black men are thinking about supply chain, blockchain, and how to get their money off the grid. And so recreational marijuana, in a place like Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we still have prohibition, that's a big thing, and I'm to the start. And I understand why some people might not be as excited about it, but considering that Barack Obama wouldn't even directly address us until after his term was over, I think it's a great start.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Dr. Brock. We can punch holes in this plan, and, obviously it's not perfect. But to Dr. Baker's point, I don't remember any candidate ever, maybe there's been one, I'm not all knowing, that said, here's a plan specifically for Black men. I think when Bloomberg was running for president, I remember going to some talks that he hosted. He had a whole economic plan. It was more for the Black community. But can you recall any presidential candidate going around the country holding listening sessions with groups of Black men and then saying, okay, here's a plan?
Not in recent memory, no. And so, and that, from that perspective, it is kind of refreshing. But as I monitor my Twitter timeline, I see a lot of contrarian Black men who are like, well, all we gonna get is a loan and some weed. Like, how is that gonna actually help the Black community? And so I'm looking at it in terms of optics.
Wait a minute, let me stop. Wait. As a lifelong entrepreneur, whoever said that is just ignorant. I'm sorry. If you get a forgivable loan that you can use to start a business, that could be transformative, and it can transform not only your life, your family's life, your community. Trust me, small businesses are the backbone of this country. And if you have an opportunity to sign a check, the front of a check, you can help people buy homes, cars, send their kids to college, transform lives. So anybody sitting around saying that a forgivable loan is not important, they need some education. I'm sorry.
And to Dr. Baker's point, it seems that Black men are one of the heaviest investors in crypto, right? And so I think that actually is kind of a genius move on her part to recognize that we have an involvement in that particular mode of financialization. And so, it's like Dr. Baker said, it's a good start. There are other things that she...
Hold on a second. What else are these contrarians online saying? It's some weed and whatever you just said. They're buying into the Trump, grievance culture. What are the other critiques of the plan?
So I've been having run-ins with folk on who claim to represent American descendants of slavery. And so they are at the forefront of critiques of the Democrats in particular. They've started to come out more strongly against the Democrats, as saying that Black voters should turn to Trump because Trump offers more without taking Black folk for granted. And so at this point, I'm seeing some of this contrarian views that are completely divorced from appropriate critiques of whether or not the Biden-Harris administration is supporting genocide. They're basically turning to older economic arguments, saying that, this government, as every other liberal government has done, is not focused on taking care of the Black community, right? But centering it in a kind of men's rights rhetoric that makes it even more kind of pointed, but also really kind of vicious.
Well, misogynistic. And when they say that Black voters should turn to Trump because he doesn't take us for granted, what has Trump offered, Dr. Baker, to the Black community other than to denigrate us every opportunity he gets? Like when he's in Detroit saying that if he loses, all of America becomes like Detroit, which is 77% Black, which we know that was code for all of America becomes a shithole like Detroit. So what has Trump offered, and this African-American descendants of slaves, a shorthand ADOS, they have problems, so many problems. I mean, we have to have a whole nother show on them. But what, Dr. Baker, has Trump offered to Black people?
I didn't know we could cuss on the radio, but that's another story. That's another story. Yeah, I mean, Trump, to be fair, at the end of his term, he did do some things around expunging records and letting some high-profile rappers out. You know, I think there's a lot more can be done. And I heard from a birdie inside the White House that Biden is going to make a play. And today, legendary drug dealer turned entrepreneur Big Meech was actually let out, which I think a lot of Black men are going to be paying attention to, particularly people like myself who are on the margins of the drug economy, the underground economy. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, Donald Trump, any Black man that...
Well, let me stop you and ask you this. So, okay, Trump did pardon some high-profile rappers. How did that help the community? It may have helped that man, but I thought the claim online was that none of this is helping the Black community. And so that's what I'm trying to get at. What is the Trump plan for Black people?
Yeah, Trump doesn't have a plan for any people. The American people in general. His job is just to get in the office and keep himself out of the jails. And I think really to go after his political enemies. I think that's what he's running for. I really like how Vice President Harris is juxtaposing him with just telling people how he's so selfish, because we all can see it. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent. You can see that this guy is completely narcissistic and selfish. And so I really like how she's went and punched the bully in the face. I think that Hillary Clinton waited way too long to do that. And Biden maybe couldn't have done this time around. But I just want to be balanced. He did placate, he did pander. But again, this opportunity that Vice President Harris is putting in front of us is a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity from us to go from opposition to proposition. Once you put this in a piece of paper, I can hold you accountable to it. So if you get into office and say you're going to do something for me, man, it's up for us as Black men, like Black women have done over the last 4 to 8 years, to get organized and start to push. Because they're not going to give us anything. We got to take it.
And the thing that I'm encouraged about is the beginning, right? So again, as an entrepreneur that has started multiple businesses, $20,000 is, again, you can start a micro business with $20,000, but that doesn't have to be the end, right? That's the starting point. So if you can start at a point of giving 1 million people $20,000 forgivable loans, we know people got ahead when they got COVID checks for $1,200, $1,500. People were able to save money and do things that they otherwise would not have been able to do. So I think there are people who, no matter what Kamala Harris does or says, they are going to find fault with it. We cannot underestimate the role of misogyny and racism in this election, and that Black men are misogynistic too. We talk a lot about white supremacy, but we cannot forget that there are Black men who do not want to see a woman in office. And if you can't find some hope in a plan that was created after, and she didn't just start this. I think a lot of people, I've heard some comments that this is pandering, but Kamala Harris, even before she was at the top of the ticket, had started these round tables convening folks at the vice president's, her residence in DC, where she was talking to Black men. So that's not a fair critique to say that this is a result of, just these poll numbers or this, talk about Black men defecting from the Democratic ticket. That's not accurate. That's completely false. And I know many, many Black men, many have been on this show. Many I've talked to personally have been at those meetings. And those meetings, I'm talking, were a year and a half ago. She wasn't going to be the president. She was going to be on the ticket, but as vice president. So she on her own, maybe with some prodding, I don't know that per se, but she took it upon herself to have those meetings around this country. So that is really, really important. Let's talk about the health issue too, because I get excited about that. We know that Black men die prematurely from so many chronic diseases. And this plan also focuses on some of those illnesses, Dr. Brock, some of those things that plague Black men. Sickle cell. I have a friend who died prematurely of sickle cell. Prostate cancer. We all know a Black man with prostate cancer. What do you make of that part of it? And what are the folks online saying about that?
That part seems to have fallen a little bit under the radar. folk are still talking about, at least on my social media, the home health care that Harris is talking about doing, integrating home health care into Medicare. And so that seems to be much more relevant to folks' concerns about health than it is about Black men, which is interesting because there have been a number of Black men around my age, mid 50s and younger, who have suddenly passed, not clearly because of COVID, but of heart attack issues at ages where they should be too young to having to deal with that. But I don't think folk have made that connection. I will say that the optics for this particular proposal are not great because of Obama's speech last week before, right? Where people thought that he was doing another version of the pound cake speech, the Pookie and Ray Ray speech, where he was directly talking to Black men, and a lot of folk felt like, well, why is he picking on Black men? You need to go talk to his mama people. Right. And so, right. And so there's some elements of Black political discourse where it's understood that we vote largely as a solid block because we're pragmatic. Right. And so there were a number of people, again, in my online spaces who felt that there's no reason for Black politicians to critique Black men or about their misogyny or their other behaviors because we're going to vote Democrat anyway. And so then to follow that up with a plan that specifically points to Black men, I can see why people are saying, oh, well, they're trying to cover up what Obama did last week, right? That's
a conspiracy theory. Again,
but that's what we do.
No, again, I'm going to set the record straight. I'm on a 7-state battleground tour doing live events. I'm in Las Vegas today. I was in Arizona 2 days ago. I'm going to be in Milwaukee on Monday. And one of the things I'm going to make sure I do on this tour is tell people the truth and debunk a lot of the lies and disinformation that goes around on the internet. It is absolutely positively a lie that Kamala Harris introduced this program to cover up or somehow, make excuses for what Obama said in his speech. That is categorically false. And anybody that believes that, please don't, because it's not true. It's fake news. It's fake. It's just not accurate. Now, what Obama said is what Obama said, but this plan was in the works, again, because of a year plus campaign that she has been on, trying to better understand what Black men wanted to see out of the Democratic Party and to address the concerns that Black men were voicing, that they felt like they were being taken for granted. So Donald Trump, I have not heard yet a plan that he has. In fact, a really popular PAC executive who says he represents 50,000 Black men across the country tried to get a meeting with Donald Trump before he endorsed Kamala Harris. He got meetings with her high-level executives or staff with her campaign. Said Donald Trump offered him a 5-minute photo op. That was it. That was it. Not a sit down, not to go over a plan, not to talk about what he would do. So when people say the Democrats take Black people and Black men for granted, you need to be asking the question, what are Republicans? What have they ever offered? And in this election, there are receipts out there where people have tried to talk to Donald Trump about plans, and he won't do it because his base won't let him do it. And even what he has done for Black folks, he has to be careful about what the little bit that he's done, because the MAGA base is not interested in him doing anything for basically anyone, and definitely not Black people. So we have to be very clear about that. I do want to talk about Milwaukee, though, and Obama. Dr. Baker, I read a really shocking article that Milwaukee Black voters were stepping away, again, not stepping away from Dems to go Republican, but that they were disenchanted after they went all in for Obama in 2008. They bought the hope and change message. And then this article, really long piece on the New York Times, I don't know if you saw it. Milwaukee voters said they didn't see much change and they didn't feel very hopeful. And over the last several election cycles, their voting numbers have dwindled. What do you make of that? And, is Kamala Harris the candidate that perhaps gets them back to where they were in 2008 in terms of, their voting numbers?
Well, I spent a lot of time talking about this and studying it, and I've been working in Milwaukee now on the grassroots since 2004. I've basically run organizations that have knocked every single door in Milwaukee. And I think there's two things that people aren't talking about. Black folks in Milwaukee are moving to the suburbs. So there's less Black people even in the neighborhood that used to traditionally be Black. And people aren't talking about that's happening all across the Midwest as Black social mobility rises. Our incomes are rising. There is a disparity between, Black communities in terms of class, but a lot of Black people are reaching middle class status for the first time.
But Dr. Baker, so you told us one issue that's driving voter turnout or lack thereof, or whatever dwindling number in Milwaukee is related to Black folks becoming more middle class and moving to the suburbs. What's the second reason we may see a slight decline in Black voters in Milwaukee?
Well, I think the reality of it is in states like Wisconsin and Michigan and the Midwest, the Democratic Party is still run by like crunchy white people, you know what I mean? Who don't have connections to the hood. And so from someone who's done campaigns for a long time, the campaigning is bad. The campaigning is bad. The strategy is bad. They don't bring in the right influencers. I heard today that a Black men strategy is going to happen at the end of the month, which is 5 days before the election. And
you heard what's coming up?
Well, I heard I got a call today to come to a Black men event that was supposed to be today, but it's been moved to November 1st.
Oh, I got
you. They're cutting it right to the wire. And I think a lot of that has to do with it. There's this really strong activist class or consultant class that has really cut out grassroots voices. And so at the same time that we're saying that Black people aren't voting, Milwaukee has elected a Black mayor for the first time, Black county executive for the first time. We have a Black sheriff, a Black police chief. And so we are voting. It's just that I think, unfortunately, the Democratic Party, outside of the candidates, haven't done a good job of running real strategies that we appreciate. And it's a struggle. I'm not mad at the candidates. I'm mad at the party. And I think whatever happens at the end of this election, we have to do something in the party that doesn't continually make a group that's going to vote at least 70 to 80% for the candidate, the victim. Or the protagonist, the antagonist. We got to stop doing that. And I think that Harris and the people that surround her are going to do that. I really do. I believe in that.
Well, I'm encouraged too. I mean, again, this Black opportunity plan for this opportunity plan for Black men, I think, speaks to a commitment that Kamala Harris has. We have to remember she got in this race as the top of the ticket at July 21st. So in 70 days, I mean, she has raised $1 billion. She has brought this party together. Candidates running for House and Senate seats have seen just unprecedented amounts of money pouring into their campaigns. And before the switch between Biden and Harris, those campaigns were, just really suffering. So, I mean, she has done so much already to energize the party. Let's talk a little, Dr. Brock, though, about the interview with Charlamagne the God. Again, this focus on Black men. So she's going to go into Detroit and do this interview with a popular radio host. What did you make of the interview? One of the questions he asked her was that she often is accused of being scripted, not being comfortable answering questions unless she's teleprompted, that she repeats herself. And I thought she had a really brilliant answer for the question about being repetitive. But what did you think of the interview overall?
I think her media strategy overall is actually surprisingly well executed, in that she's going to spaces where the people she needs to reach are actually listening. She's not relying on the mainstream, which has a habit of trying to force her to respond to what Trump and the Republicans say, as opposed to promoting her own policies. If there's anything I would fault her for, it's particularly that Charlamagne is asking her to respond to, how do you feel about what people say about you? And let's skip all that. That stuff is not important. And so she actually has done a fantastic job on this press tour, the Charlamagne the God piece included. And so I'm really happy to see the way she's handling this. I'm really curious to see how she does with Brett Baer tonight as well.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I loved her answer. Just anyone that didn't see it, he asked her, people accuse you of repeating the same thing. She says, look, I do repeat it purposely, intentionally, because for a lot of people, until they hear it 3 times, it doesn't resonate with them. And she says, I want people to be clear about who I am and what my policies are. So I do say the same thing in Detroit as I say in Philadelphia, as I say, in Chicago or wherever I am. And that makes a lot of sense, because we know that people are half listening. People are watching or listening while they're multitasking. And it is important that her message, again, given what a condensed time period she had for this entire campaign, that she repeats it and that people are clear, because you still hear people stating things about her that aren't true. So I just thought that was really important. And as a lawyer, she's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, we're trained. That's a part of our legal training, is when you're giving oral arguments in court, is to find ways to repeat yourself over and over again, particularly if it is an important point, because people will remember it if they hear it a couple of times. All right. I don't know if both of you saw this interview that was on CNN with Sarah Steiner. She's an anchor in I think it's one of the CNN morning shows. But Michael Blake, good friend of mine, used to be a former state rep in New York. He now runs like a grassroots consulting firm or something. He was on with this guy. Rob, help me get this guy's name, because I watched it so quickly. I didn't really get the guy's name, but he's a radio host, a conservative Black radio host. And Dr. Brock, I think you sent me this piece. I hadn't seen it. I've been on the road, so I haven't been watching much cable news. And the guy makes a reference and said that field Black men are going to vote for Donald Trump and House Black men are voting for Kamala Harris. And he was making a distinction. And Michael Blake was like, what are you talking about? And so was the host, Sarah, also a friend of mine. And, you know, the reference he was saying is like real men that make stuff with their hands, like plumbers and painters and construction workers. We're going to vote for Donald Trump. And then like people who don't make anything, that it would be the two of you that teach, college and, white collar professionals. You all are voting for Kamala Harris. And Michael and Sarah were like trying to be as polite as possible and just not go ballistic on this ridiculous reference. But what did you make of that, Dr. Brock? Obviously, it I don't know, triggered you. I'll use that word because you sent it to me to look at.
It struck a nerve, in part because I'm actually talking to one of my line brothers over text while we're having this interview. And his feeling is that type of information only happens on Twitter, that type of misinformation, that type of positioning. And I keep trying to tell them that's stuff that people are hearing outside of Twitter, on Fox News, these conservative Black radio hosts, the relationship podcast industry, other podcasts that promote these things. And so I appreciate the clip in part because it exposes that misinformation is above and beyond social media, right? And it's egregious. Right. The idea that you want to separate people into field Negroes and house Negroes. Right. But
I was surprised at his definition that a field Negro was a plumber and a house Negro was a professional. And then when they pushed him on it, Dr. Baker, he says, well, don't blame me. This is what Malcolm X said. And you all didn't jump down the throat of Malcolm X. So he tried to tie himself to Malcolm X. I think his name is Shelley Winter. Is that his name? He has a radio show. Did you see the clip, Dr. Baker?
I saw it briefly, and this is a false dichotomy. The Uncle Tom Cabin was written by a white woman. You know what I mean? All these tropes are from white people. Can you imagine how horrific it would have been to work inside a house during slavery every single day? You got a white man or white woman or white child breathing down your neck. This is an absolutely false dichotomy that we've got into. And yeah, Malcolm X, he definitely used it. I've heard my other nationalist brother used that, but the reality of it is no, it's ridiculous. But I really agree with Dr. Brock here. There is a misinformation campaign that's going completely out of control. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are not Black media outlets. The scale of Black media outlets are smaller than they've ever been. People aren't looking at the Courier. They ain't looking at the Defender. And they're not looking at BET Teen Summit or Rock the Vote on MTV. And unfortunately, this is having a huge effect on our young people who are not getting civic education in our high schools. They don't know about the Constitution. They don't know about the different branches of government. They're well-intended young people, but we have intentionally misinformed or uneducated our youth. And whatever we do, we have to embrace our young people, tell them the truth, and really get them involved in civic education.
Let's start by telling them that under Project 2025, we would do away with, or Donald Trump and Republicans would do away with the whole Department of Education. So we know that this miseducation of students is happening very intentionally. The wiping out, the complete erasing of Black history is not happening just kind of casually. It is a part of a concerted effort so that individuals are not educated. That came up, this brilliant brother, after the presidential debate, Walz and JD Vance. And then JD Vance kept saying, Kamala Harris, she's already in office. How come she didn't do this? And how come she didn't do that? He kept making that reference. And then I forget, some cable station, this black guy was, in a focus group, and they went to him and they said, what did you make of that? He said, first of all, let's be clear what the vice presidential powers are and are not. Vice President Kamala Harris had no power to do 99.9% of the things that JD Vance accused her of not doing. She didn't do them because she didn't have the power as the vice president to do them. But that's to your point about, so many people don't understand our branches of government. I try to make that point. I've been making that point on my Battleground State tour, trying to connect the dots, the Supreme Court, the Department of Justice, Black young people who march with Black Lives Matter, that care about police brutality, that want to see police held accountable. Under a Trump administration, he did away pretty much with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. He shut down investigations of police departments. He said no more. There were no consent decrees entered into under the Trump administration. So if you care about Black lives, if you care about prosecuting rogue cops, you cannot logically support Donald Trump, because Donald Trump wants complete immunity, and the Supreme Court has pretty much given him that, but he also wants police officers to have complete immunity. And if you don't have a federal Department of Justice, and it's not perfect, and Merrick Garland, I think, is one of the weakest appointments of Joe Biden, but Kristen Clark, bad sister, holding it down in that Civil Rights Department. If you don't have someone like her going into these police departments, cops will just run amok. Bad cops, not good ones. We have some good cops, so I don't want to, make a disparaging remarks about all police officers, but young people don't necessarily make that connection, and that's some of that. Again, disinformation out there, and people don't understand the branches of government, and then they make these decisions, and they wake up one day and wonder, how come these cops haven't been prosecuted? Well, guess what? They probably are, under Donald Trump, they won't be prosecuted because they'll have complete immunity. All right, Dr. Baker and Dr. Brock, I need some advice from both of you. I am sitting in Masterpiece Barber College. The owner is an entrepreneur named Marcus Allen. I'm here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Marcus Allen owns 4 Black barbershops throughout the Las Vegas community, and he owns this barber college, educates probably, 70, 80% of all Black barbers in the state of Nevada. I'm going to be talking with a panel of Black men, a pastor, an elected official, and an entrepreneur. What's the best advice you can give me? This conversation around Black male voters. We've talked about Obama. Obama's going to be here in Las Vegas. We know he's still incredibly popular. Thousands of people show up at his rallies. Magic Johnson has been out talking to Black men. They've had a lot of high-profile surrogates. But what is the message that you all think is the best message to be delivering to Black men in this moment? All right, Dr. Brock, I'll start with you.
You're asking a tough question. And I say that because I'm very much aware that this election will not be decided on facts. It will not be decided on policy. At some point, the Democrats will have to acknowledge that addressing people in their spirit and their feelings will be more effective than trying to continually bombard them with policy proposals that address minute portions of what we care about, right? And so to the Black men, both young and old, that you're going to talk to, I would point out that overall, these policy proposals actually are doing something significant for Black communities in a way that is not accessible through any Republican or GOP platform. So this entrepreneur stuff is nice, but we could also talk about that down payment for housing. We could also talk about other things that are also things that will lift the tide of Black economic success and institutional success as a way to get people to get off their misogyny, to get off their toxic masculinity, to get off their colorism, right? And bias against the fact that VP Harris is biracial, right? And move towards instead looking for ways to build the community out through the policies that are being suggested.
Okay, great advice, but break it down for me, because you said don't talk so much about policies, but address people where they are in terms of their feelings. So if I start talking about the housing, policy, the build 3 million more houses, give people down payment assistance, the tax break for business owners. Isn't that talking about policies rather than people's feelings?
If you frame it as doing things for the community, as opposed to leading with these are the policy proposals that this candidate has suggested, you start to touch people at the things that they care about. So one of the big problems of the Democrats is that they keep saying the economy is better, the economy is better. And the Republicans have been hitting them on the fact that prices are high. They don't say why prices are high. They say prices are high and it's VP Harris's fault, as if the Trump policies didn't have anything to do with that. And so you can talk about policy changes, but instead reach people where they are. Okay, yes, prices are high. Here are the things we're doing to address that. Something that came out today, which is random, but I bet the men in your audience will feel that. The FTC chair announced today that they will now institute a policy that you have to be able to cancel a subscription with one click. You don't have to go through no justifications. You don't have to go through any explanations. You don't have to walk your handwritten letter to Planet Fitness anymore to get rid of it. You can do it with one click. And there are enough brothers in there who work out at Planet Fitness. Talk to them about the fact that this is an administration that cares about the barricades that these companies are throwing up to make your life worse. And we're working on policies to address your quality of life.
Excellent. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, Dr. Baker, what advice do you have for me?
Now, I don't know what this room is going to look like, and I heard it's not the NFL great, Marcus Allen, so I don't know. But my sense is that it's going to be older Black men, and in my life, I've had some great Black male mentors, James Lawson, Harry Belafonte, Tarek Ross from the hood in LA. But overwhelmingly, what we see is a lot of older Black men gatekeeping. They get in the way. They don't want to lift people up. They get there and they hold on forever. I know so many 60 and 70-year-old brothers still trying to control the dollars in the Democratic Party. It's ridiculous. And so I would say get out the way. Embrace the young brothers who are less misogynistic, who are less toxic, who are more sensitive, who are more tapped into their mental health, and lift them up. Ensure that they have the resources and the dollars to organize. If not, we will absolutely lose. And if you live in a place like Los Angeles or on the West Coast, come to Milwaukee, come to Detroit. We will put you to work because the same day registration state, and we still can get we still get tens of thousands of Black men out. So show up. We got your back.
Oh, that is such an important point. I love that. And I've been telling folks in Arizona and in Las Vegas, I've been spreading the word, talking to people. I talked to a group last night in LA that was trying to raise money. I said, oh, money is good, but obviously Harris got a whole lot of money. I said, what we need more right now are volunteers, because I'm not crazy about the folks I'm seeing in some of these field offices, not looking as robust as I know we can be. We need 2008 Obama turnout, and I think we can get there. And I love your point, Dr. Baker, that folks that live in states like California, they're going to vote blue. We need those folks to get out of their homes and get on the road, get on a bus, get on a plane, and go into some of these battleground states where we can have an impact. So yes, I did it, and I'm encouraging everyone to do it. You may not have, 2 weeks to be on the road, but if you have a weekend, if you can get to a battleground state and just give them a day of your time, you can make a tremendous, tremendous difference. Can't wait to meet you in person, Dr. Baker. I'll be in Milwaukee on Monday, trying to do my part, knocking doors, talking to voters, because we can win this. We can win this. We can win this, but we've got work to do. 21 days seems like a short period of time, but that's a lifetime to talk to our friends and our family members and tell them, as Michelle Obama told all of us, just do something.